The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or to view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
So I'm going to try to run through things pretty quickly, and if you don't have any sort of video experience or still photography experience, a lot of this will sound foreign to you. If you do, some of it will be very familiar. But either way, if what I'm saying is confusing because of the sort of the density of it, I would just sort of encourage you not to be too freaked out, because the takeaways are actually fairly simple. I mean, it's kind of like, again, there's a lot of complicated technology and a lot of complicated technique, but the base is pretty simple. And what I'm going to do, partly what I want to do today is just expose you to some concepts and terms that you actually may not have to really fully grasp or have like mastery of in order to make your video, but it's worth it to at least kind of know what they are, I think.
I can condense my stuff.
Yeah, but I do want to. I'm very cognizant of not wanting to spend more than like 30 minutes. So can you tell me if I'm like maybe 10 to 2, just kind of give me a wave or something, and I'll condense even more. Okay, so visual language. I mean, there's a sort of a question. What do we mean by visual language? Because it's kind of a contradiction in terms. Sometimes we think of language and the visual as being at odds with each other. We have text, we have speech. And we talk about, oh, well, we got to make it visual. So, what is a visual language? It goes back to something that I talked about in the first class. And in some ways, what I'm going to do today is try to build on some of those things that I sort of raced through then. We have all of these plastic elements of film that we can manipulate. And today I'm going to focus on a handful of them, in particular camera. Because the camera is kind of the speech device that allows us to speak in this visual language. And Elizabeth made a really interesting point, or quoted a very interesting kind of way of thinking about it, which was all of us understand this language better than any generation that's ever lived, because we just have consumed it our entire lives, but that doesn't mean we can speak it. And understanding it is a great first step in speaking it, but you really have to kind of unpack it and think about it consciously in order to be able to kind of reproduce it or change it and make it what you want it to be. Anyway, so I'm going to race through some of these fairly quickly, focus mostly on camera, and I'm going to dispense with sound right away, because I just want to say about sound, don't dispense with it right away. Don't do what I'm doing. It is super, super important. As I think I mentioned this the other day, getting good sound is absolutely critical. And sometimes sound can be more important than picture and all the stuff I'm going to talk about. It's also sort of the boring part sometimes. Is the microphone close enough to me? I don't know. Who's listening to me? Am I okay? Good. All right, because it's really important. Because if you don't hear me, or even if you can sort of hear me, but it's a camera mic and it's 6 feet away, there's a huge barrier between your audience and your material. So do not skimp on sound. The environmental sound is important. It's important to be in a quiet room. It's important to have good mic placement. It's important not to have a signal be too soft or too loud. Listen with your ears. And then, creatively, you can do so much with sound too, with music and sound effects. But I don't really have time to talk about that stuff. So, yeah, okay, good. I just want to sort of make the pitch to not forget about sound in all of this. But let's go on and talk about camera. And I don't know if there are any theater people here or people who've done theater, but I want to start with this concept of the proscenium. Film and video, film at least, has been around for over 100 years, 125 years or something like that. The sort of first Edison experiments, or the Lumiere brothers in France, I think it was the late 19th century. And for the first 20 years of the technology, the way people kind of accessed it or thought about it and the kinds of things that people did were based on theater. And because that, of course, is thousands of years old. In a theater, you sit in an audience and there's a frame, which is the proscenium, and then stuff happens in the frame. And a lot of the plastic elements that we ran through the other day are very, very relevant. You've got lighting, you've got staging, you've got frame, sort of placement of people, you've got costumes, you've got sound effects, music even, all sorts of things. Very, very similar. But it all happens in this kind of static frame right there in the middle of your field of view. And it was really literally about 20 years before people started going, oh, with a camera we can do something a little bit different than that. For the first films, and these were wildly popular films, I mean, it was already a big industry. Very quickly, it turned into a major entertainment and communication industry. But people would set up a camera, and then people would do their thing in front of the camera, and then they would project the thing, and people would be like, wow, this is really cool. This is like theater, except we can watch it again and again. And this is very relevant to educational video because that is essentially what a lecture is. A lecture is a proscenium presentation of material. And the question which you're asking yourselves in this class is, okay, we got that, we get that. When we watch media, whether it's online or on television or in a theater, obviously we have progressed way beyond that visually in terms of visual language. And the tools and techniques that we use to do that are the things that you need to do in order to become conversant in this, quote unquote, visual language, not just a consumer of it, but a speaker of it. So I'm going to go over something that it's sort of like a convenient bucket to put things into, and it's also easy to remember. When I think about camera, I think about the 4 Fs, and some of them are F because I make them be F. Just it's easier. So f-stop or exposure, and if you know anything about photography or film, f-stop is the aperture of the camera lens, and you can let more or less light in. But what I mean by that actually is not just the f-stop or the exposure of the lens, but how you control the light. It could be lighting, it could be the shutter speed, there are a million different ways of controlling the exposure of what you're filming. Second thing is focus. First thing about focus is it's a good idea to have it. It's kind of one of those non-negotiable things. You really do want something to be in focus in your frame. Sometimes you might not, but it's better to do that in post. Always make sure something's in focus. You may be working with cameras that take care of this for you, both of these, the exposure and the focus. I'm not sure, is that true?
So they're all working with the Canon Vixias.
Okay.
Or your iPhones. The equipment that you guys will be working with, you won't have to necessarily, it's not an element that you can control necessarily on the device itself.
Or you can control it only by fooling the device, which is something you might want to do if you get more sort of comfortable with it.
To do focus on these cameras, you just literally touch the touch screen with your finger where you want the element to be in focus. And exposure, we're going to have to tweak with the external lighting itself.
Yeah. 99 times out of 100, it's pretty straightforward, and the auto systems on newer cameras are really pretty good about it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time dwelling on that, but they're kind of non-negotiable. You want to get a good exposure, and you want to get something in focus. And 9 times out of 10, that something is someone's face, the person who you're filming. Not always, but usually. Third one is focal length, and that is basically how many millimeters you are shooting at from wide angle to telephoto. And your camera, you're not going to be changing lenses on the camera, but you can zoom in and out. Focal length is not the same thing as wide shot or close-up. People often think that that's true, but it's not. You can go completely wide angle on a camera and then walk up. I can walk right up to Elizabeth and get a close-up. And similarly, I can go all the way telephoto and walk back 50 feet and get a wide shot. But they have very, very different kinds of resonances and feelings and emotions. So and I'll try to talk a little bit about that in a minute. You might want to do everything at a very long lens. You might want to do everything at a wide angle. It will mean something different. It will feel different. Framing, this is the big one, and this is kind of like the catch-all that I throw all of this sort of real thinking about visual language into. It's not just framing, as I talked about the other day, like, oh, gee, do I center somebody? Do I put them on the right, on the left? It's the entire structure of your video. How am I going to shoot this? Where am I going to put the camera? How is it going to edit together? Is the camera going to move? Is it not going to move? So framing is the big one, and that's mostly what I'm going to talk about today in that broader context. Quickly, so exposure, just to get this out of the way, this is what an aperture looks like in a lens. Again, it's automated for you. Big number means not a lot of light getting through. Little number means a lot of light's getting through. This affects the exposure in a way that I'm not going to get into, but basically you have a lot more depth of field, a lot more will be in focus the smaller the hole, because the photons that get through are more directed, they're less scattered. And we talked about this. Just as a sort of an example of plastic elements of film, so these are two stills from Science Out Loud videos. I think we saw a little bit of the exoplanets video the other day. I don't know if you've seen this one on plants.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Okay. What I thought was really interesting about these two frames is, if I was storyboarding this, you know, what would I draw? I would draw something like this, right? Medium shot, you know, presenting to camera. But that doesn't capture anything about what is, you know, compelling about these shots. It's all the other stuff. You know, here we are launching into space, deep space, to look at planets, and here we are, bright, welcoming, you know, the world of plants. It's kind of an obvious point, but this tells us nothing about that, unless you then add a lot of other information. And that's kind of what storyboarding is about. It's not just about kind of what does my shot look like, but it's about, you know, what is all the stuff in the shot that's going to really make it compelling. And it's really a great moment to start thinking about, you know, locations. Field of flowers. Wow, yeah, I guess I need a field of flowers. Where am I going to get that? Or what if everything was black? You know, what if it's a black screen, and how are we going to shoot that? Lighting. I don't know if that's even an option here. I'm not going to go into it, but
we have a light kit if people are interested in doing lighting. But come talk to either one of us during office hours or after class or something.
The only thing I'm going to say about lighting is it's kind of like being a doctor. Like, first, do no harm. If you bring lights out and you don't know kind of what you're doing and you aren't sort of trained on the kit, you can break the kit. You can hurt yourself or someone else, or you can ruin your video. On the other hand, it's really, really an important tool and something that, you know, you can't shoot certain kinds of things without some kind of lighting. I'm not necessarily recommending that you try to use artificial lights or, you know, become a lighting expert. It's a little beyond the scope. But if there's something like, you know, to go back to this example, you have to light to get a look like that. That some kind of lighting has to be done. You know, maybe not film lighting or video lighting, but some kind of lighting setup has to be created in order to get a look like that. Yeah.
After filming.
I'm sorry?
Maybe editing.
Oh, can you do it?
You can improve it, but you have to begin with something that's been filmed with that intention.
If you have an effect that you want to do in your video, you can come talk to me about it, because we can achieve some of these things with jankier props. Like I've done, I'm not proud to admit Chris.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I've done a shoot.
Oh, you don't even know janky till you've been on some of the shoots I've done.
Like desk lamps that I.
Oh, totally, yeah.
With like white tissue paper to help diffuse the light. You don't need a super fancy light kit to achieve some of the basic.
No, absolutely, and that's exactly what I'm about to get into. To do like that sort of like dark room thing, I mean, you don't need a fancy video light kit, but you do need to light the person. And yeah, it could be a desk lamp with paper over it to sort of smooth it out, you know, to diffuse the light. But you will need to do something. It's not going to just magically happen. And that's the point of this. Lighting doesn't necessarily mean a video light kit. It means being aware of the environment and the available light that you're shooting in, and taking that into account, either by manipulating that thing like a light kit, or by taking advantage of the best light in the world, which is the sun. So, you know, for example, if I was shooting in this room and I didn't have any lights, I might love the background out there, but shooting somebody in front of that window is not going to be possible if I want to get the background. Because by the time I expose for the person's face, the background is going to be completely blown out. And if I expose for the background, the person is silhouetted. So unless I want that look, I really can't have it, unless I bring in lights, and it would actually take quite a bit of lighting. Fluorescence, you know, you can do a lot with fluorescent overheads. I mean, the difference between me standing here, look at my face here, and look at my face, here. Where do you want your person to stand? And you can manipulate that kind of thing even in a lab or a classroom or some other setting. You can make choices based on the available light or the ambient light that will help you. And the other thing to think about, in terms of exposure, going back to exposure, is what do I want to be properly exposed? In that face, floating in blackness, the face is properly exposed. Everything else is very, very dark, but the face is properly exposed. In the flower shot, the whole thing is properly exposed. It's more even lighting. There's some nice modeling on the face, but the whole point of that is that you want to see the environment, you want to see the flowers, you want to have this very vibrant, bright scene. So being very sensitive to the light that's available is part of lighting. It's not necessarily like setting up a bunch of light stands and video lights and spending 2 hours when you should have been shooting your scene, because it can also be very time consuming.
Just a quick tip on lighting. Yep. Since most of you will probably be filming indoors and relying a lot on fluorescent overhead lights, the only caveat to that is that oftentimes, maybe there are only 2 people in here, but for me, like the glasses is a big issue. Mm-hmm. You'll get like a weird shadow underneath on people's faces.
Or glare in the lens, yeah.
Or glare. So you can compensate for that with like maybe a desk lamp that's also shown on your face from a little bit below to hide some of those shadows.
Particularly, as Elizabeth mentioned, if you diffuse that light with like some kind of tissue or something in front of it. Because one thing about lighting, the first do no harm, when you're lighting faces, harsh, direct light, whether it's sunlight or desk lamps or video lights, are very unflattering. So that's absolutely a great tip, but I think it's always a good idea to sort of try to diffuse it. You can put like, if it's not a hot light, you can even put like a tissue or a paper towel, a white paper towel in front of it, and it will give this very nice soft light.
But if you're shooting something indoors and you just feel like the person looks a little funky on the screen, it's probably because it's like an overhead light that's casting shadows in a weird way. So just experiment with like a desk lamp or something.
Yep. And I'm not going to go into focus too much because, again, I know you're going to be working with autofocus. But just to say, make sure that what you want to be in focus is in focus. There are all sorts of things you can do to mess with the depth of field, which is like how much of the plane of your image is in focus. So if you're very wide open, if there's not a lot of light, then suddenly you have very shallow focus, which means if you were filming me, my face might be in focus and the background would be out of focus. If you are stopping way, way down because there's a ton of light, suddenly it's a very deep focus situation where everything's in focus. And that may or may not be a good thing. You may not want more focus. There's something very nice about just what you want to be in focus and everything else being out of focus, because that makes people's eyes go to what you want them to see. It also creates depth in the frame.
Does everyone understand what depth of field in the frame means?
So this is, here I am. So this is, I don't know if you've seen this Science Out Loud video, Engineering Trash into Treasure. I won't show it, but it's got a really nice opening, which uses depth of field really effectively. So this is a person talking about the creation of charcoal, and in the foreground are the props, and she's out of focus. And it's kind of counterintuitive because your presenter is out of focus, and the props are in focus in the foreground. But it's actually quite engaging and interesting. And then what they do, and this is something that you will have a hard time doing if you are just doing autofocus, is they shift the focus to reveal her. And that's a reveal. That's something we talked about the other day. Revealing things is part of the visual language that you want to think about, whether it's with a cut, with an edit, a change of the angle, a pan, a camera move. Revealing your next thing is just kind of a key visual element. So here it's like, the burning, I forget what kind of corn. Yeah, the burning corn husks come into frame, and then the charcoal comes into frame, and then the focus shifts, and you reveal the person who's been talking to you. It's cool. It's a nice little opening.
It's really hard to achieve depth of field with these camcorders.
Yeah, exactly.
One way you can sort of trick it is if you stand really far in front of your background. That's the closest way you're going to get that blurry background effect. So if you wanted to film in this classroom, for instance, and you didn't want the stuff on the chalkboard to be really visible, you would have Chris move up all the way up to maybe piece and then shoot from the very back of the room.
Right, and so that's what this is. So again, you have a zoom lens. If you go all the way wide on the lens, you have much deeper focus than if you zoom all the way in. So if I walk up and shoot Elizabeth with a very wide angle, everything behind her will be in focus. If I go way back there and I get the same kind of close-up of Elizabeth with a longer part of the zoom, everything behind her will be out of focus, which might be better if we don't care about the background and if it's messy. I mean, I've often been in labs that just look horrible. And the best way to handle that is to zoom way in, go way back, and have the background be way out of focus. Or you can, as Elizabeth mentioned, you can bring the person forward so that there's a lot of distance between the person and the background. So focus, focal length, all of these things relate to each other. And again, we're going to move a little quickly, but yeah. No, I'm doing fine, I think. I think I'm doing OK. This is an extreme wide angle. You can see how deep the focus is. It's infinity. And this is a telephoto. So it's a close-up, but even the leaf behind the bird is out of focus. Just a word about zooms. So there are two kinds of zoom, and there's one kind of danger, two kinds of danger, actually. Optical zoom, which is if you zoom in and out with the zoom control on your camera, that is the way you change the focal length. Then there's digital zoom, which is usually on these cameras, I assume these are like this, if you go past a certain point, you're not changing the lens anymore, you're just zooming in on the image itself digitally. The problem with that is that your resolution goes down immediately. It looks really bad. It starts to pixelate and just fall apart. So I would recommend that you not use the digital zoom. I mean, it's kind of one of those situations, people say, oh, well, when can I use it? I'm like, well, when the UFO is landing in Killian Court and you're just too far away to get the shot, definitely use the digital zoom. But if you have time to do something different or plan a little differently, then stick with the optical.
And also realize that you can zoom in on a frame in post when you're editing.
Right. And
so it's generally better to just capture something wider. So say you want to do like a traditional interview setup and you're not sure how close you should be into your subject, go ahead and err on the side of zooming out as much as possible. You can always play with how much you zoom when you're editing later. And the other thing about zooming, I mean, maybe this is just a matter of personal preference, but generally I don't like it when I see the camera zooming in live time. I prefer seeing just a clean cut from a wider angle to the zooming in.
And that's the other part of the danger, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. That's zooms in general. I mean, unless you're doing it because you know what you're doing, and all these rules are made to be broken. That's something I should mention right up front. They're often kind of like the lazy person's way of doing something. And in general, I would even go so far as to say, even if you're not planning to show the zoom, if I was again filming Elizabeth and I wanted to get a wide shot, so I shoot her here, and then I want a close-up, and I zoom in on Elizabeth and I get the close-up, there's something kind of unpleasing about going from a wide-angle shot to a zoomed-in telephoto shot of somebody. The more sort of smart way to do it is to pick a focal length that makes Elizabeth look great and is what gives you what you want, and then move the camera in. Don't change the focal length of the lens when you change the size of the shot. So maybe I end up on a medium shot, in terms of the focal length, and then when I want to get the close-up, I pick up the camera and I walk in and get the close-up. And that's going to cut better, it's going to look better, it's going to feel better, it's going to feel like just more controlled and like you sort of knew what you were doing. So zooms, very useful, dangerous as well. All right, so back to the proscenium. I just wanted to say a little bit about framing. What shots do you actually need to tell your story? Well, the way you figure that out is exactly the way you do it with animation or anything else. You do a storyboard. And this is a storyboard I did a few years ago for a narrative scene. But you'll see it contains a lot of the things that we've talked about in this class. Who's our main character? This kid. How do we know that? Well, the next shot is a point of view of what this person is seeing. There's a moving shot up, and the next thing that you see is his grandfather is revealed. You see what they're looking at. And only then do you actually see a wide shot, which is a home-built airplane being pushed down a field. So this is kind of, this visual storytelling, a very simple thing, like who's our character, what do they see, who's around them, and then revealing the whole scene. Could have been done completely differently. This could have been the first shot. Could have been, like, let's establish the scene, let's see all the people, then let's kind of, cut in and see our main character, or, maybe it's revealed later. There's no right or wrong answer here. But the point is that, what you want to do is think through your scene, just as you do with animation. That whole process that Josh took you through is completely relevant to absolutely everything that you're going to shoot. Just a few notes about what different shots do. Wide shots establish the location, the environment, the spatial relationships. They add production value. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I could go to the top of this bridge, I would shoot this shot. I wouldn't not, because this is awesome. And that's happened. I've seen that happen. People get an incredible location, an incredible view, and they don't get the shot that shows where they were. That's what we call production value. Similarly, I think this is an awesome picture. This was actually taken in 1911. This is a Russian, pre-revolution Russian nobleman in a tiny village in Russia. It was taken in 1911. It's an amazing picture. But I would feel like I missed a huge amount if it was just his face. You learn so much about the environment. You learn so much about the person by having a wide shot. I mean, if this was a video, I might want to also have a close-up when I started to hear about him and learn about who he was. But boy, this is great. Like, how could you miss that? So again, showing environments, getting production value, establishing characters and relationships in space. Closer shots, well, they kind of bring you into someone's world. They reveal details, closer shots of a face, closer shots of what the person is looking at. If you're explaining something, obviously, really good close shots that show the angle, show from a good angle what you're trying to describe are very, very important. So again, it's kind of obvious, but just make sure to get those as well. You want to get the wide shots, but if you're actually describing a process that's like a physical process that somebody's doing, make sure you document it well, and that you don't shoot it from the angle where the person's hand is covering the key thing. Just look at your frame and see if you're actually communicating what you want to communicate. Moving shots, endless kinds of moving shots. You can pan the camera on a tripod. You can you can walk with the camera. You can move on a dolly. They have all sorts of great uses. They reveal story beats. If again, to keep picking on Elizabeth, if I want to introduce Elizabeth and I dolly or pan over to Elizabeth, people want to know what the end of that shot's going to be. What am I going to see? Oh, this person who's a character that I am supposed to pay attention to. Or you can follow a person. It creates a very strong point of view. If someone's walking and talking and you're following them, then we pay attention to that person because the camera is picking them out of the background to pay attention to. So that's part of this visual language. Similarly, we could do a point of view of that person who's walking, and then we're suddenly into their world. So, kind of a classic situation is someone's walking, we're following them, and then you cut to the reverse and you see what they see. And now we're in their head. So it's another great thing. And then there's just kind of the classic one of, we have reptile brains. This is the same reason we edit quickly. Here's a new thing, you can either cut to a new thing or you can pan or dolly to a new thing. Let's see. Just a quick word about locations. Always, and you're going to talk about this too, but always scout your locations. It's smart producing, which Elizabeth is going to talk about, but it's also very smart creatively. I've been in so many situations where I've gone to a location, a few days in advance, and I've completely rewritten my script based on the location. Either because I saw a problem that I wasn't anticipating, like, a classic one is, okay, well, we're going to film all this stuff at the electron microscope, but there's a column here, and I can't shoot anything from this angle. Oh, shit. Really good to find that out a few days in advance, because you can't move the microscope. So what are you going to do? or because the location is really cool and there's amazing stuff, and you get very excited because there's all sorts of possibilities that open up that you couldn't have ever imagined just sitting, doing your own storyboard in your room or writing your script. But suddenly, because this place is amazing, you see all sorts of things that you could do. So I always suggest trying to visit your location, one, for just kind of practical scouting reasons, like, is there like a chainsaw factory next door, but two, because it can completely affect your creative vision. And try to do it enough in advance so that you can incorporate what you learn. So I'm going to just wrap up with just a couple of words about editing. This is where all of this stuff comes together and where you find out whether your plan worked, your storyboard, your visual language, your script. And it's also where you fix all the things that didn't work. And I guarantee you that plenty of things will not work. Just a word about pacing, B-roll, and transition. So pacing is kind of, like how much do I edit? And this is kind of the big question. Like, gee, what's the big thing? What's the secret? What's my pacing? What should it be like? And I don't think there is an answer to this. I mean, when I was in film school 20 plus years ago, I was being taught by people who were trained in the 1950s. And people who were trained in the 1950s would tell us, well, you really can't edit faster than 4 seconds per shot because the human brain just can't comprehend an image that lasts shorter than 4 seconds. And I remember dutifully editing my very first piece and following that rule and watching it and going like, this sucks. Like, this is terrible. Like, what's wrong with this? This is like awful. And it's because 4 seconds is a really long time in some cases, in a lot of cases, in many cases, in most cases. And that has only increased. I mean, my idea of a fast edit may be completely different than your idea of a fast edit because I'm older. I don't know. And there's also the difference between genres. I think Elizabeth mentioned this briefly. Television, there's this sort of like, bombard everybody. Like, if you want to show an established shot of a house in a reality TV show, you can't just show 1 shot or 2 shots. You have to show 8 shots. They're each 12 frames long, like boom, 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 with like drums going, just to like make the reptile brain go, yeah, this is important somehow. I don't know. And it gets kind of absurd at a certain point, and it can be obviously over editing. But the more typical experience that people who are just starting out have is that they don't shoot enough, not that they shoot too much. You think, oh, I've got 3 shots, and this is going to cover like 30 seconds of my video, but 30 seconds can be an eternity. And if your shots aren't telling a story, that could be pretty skimpy. Which brings us to B-roll. I'm going to talk about that in 1 second with an example. The other thing, though, to think about is transitions. Like, how do I get from this to that? I mean, obviously, you can just cut, but is there an issue like I'm cutting from a medium shot of Chris talking to a medium shot of Elizabeth talking? That's not necessarily super compelling. Do I need some other way of transitioning? Do I need a wide shot of the classroom? Do I need people listening? What other shots do I need to tell my story and to transition from scene to scene? The B-roll, I just wanted to mention. Have you guys talked about what that even means at all? Okay. I was going to show this in the PowerPoint, but B-roll is a term that goes back way back, like 80 years ago when people edited on film. The B-roll was the second roll of film that they would then composite over the first roll of film. And it was all the stuff that wasn't included in the sort of main narrative. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. This is just a little snippet from a video that we shot not too long ago with Jeff Hoffman, who's a professor here in AeroAstro, former astronaut. And we had done a storyboard and kind of a script plan, so we knew when he was going to be on camera and when not.
The design, construction, and operation of aerospace vehicles have allowed us to leave the surface of the Earth and fly through our planet's atmosphere and out into space. I'm Jeff Hoffman. I'm a professor in the Department of Aeronautics.
So anyway, we knew that he wasn't going to be on camera in the first part, so we were able to cut between takes. We didn't even bother to, get a really, have him be compelling on camera at that point. But here, we knew he would be on camera, so we filmed him that way. And the first string out is just literally putting together your script in a very linear way, the way you wrote it, you know, without any kind of fancy stuff. And then I'll just show you what it looked like after. Well, I'll just show the first 10 seconds and then I'll be done.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Have you ever wondered how rockets work? Have you ever looked out of the window of an airplane and wondered how something so big and heavy can actually fly? Have you ever wondered what happens to the human body in space, or how a spacesuit keeps astronauts alive and able to work in the vacuum of space? These topics are all part of aerospace engineering. Aerospace engineering has given humans the freedom to move in 3 dimensions. The design, construction, and operation of aerospace vehicles have allowed us to leave the surface of the Earth and fly through our planet's atmosphere and out into space.
Mission Specialist Jeff Hoffman.
Hello, Jeff.
I'm Jeff Hoffman. I'm a professor in the Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics at MIT. Before coming to MIT, I spent 19 years at NASA.
Out, we were able to shoot with him very, very quickly because we knew what we needed on camera, and we knew that we were going to be able to cover and fill and sort of explain things with other imagery. In this case, a lot of it's obviously archival stuff, but it could be stuff that we shot. And later in the video, there's stuff that we shot but it was all the same plan. Anyway, I know that's a lot of stuff thrown at you, but I'm cognizant of the time, so we can talk about this after class too, if you'd like. Thanks.
So just to give another example of B-roll, maybe on a more likely level for you guys, because I assume you won't be going out into outer space.
Well, neither did we. I call NASA. NASA's a great resource.
For Anastasia's video,
awesome compounds have in common? They all come from plants!
you notice that she's not talking over any of it. We put the B-roll in because we needed to give the video a little bit of space to breathe. Otherwise, it would have been just her talking constantly and saying facts. So we wanted to help with the pacing of the video, which was what Chris was talking about. So that's why we shot B-roll. So if you're, especially you, Paul, because I imagine you're going to shoot some stuff maybe with the boats or like you have access to certain equipment. Whoever you're filming with, you're not only going to shoot Paul, but I would also spend some time like maybe just doing a pan of your environment, shooting some of the equipment that's around. It may not be super relevant to what you're talking about exactly in those moments, but you can always have that footage to intersperse like we did here, if that makes sense. And as Chris was saying, you're not always going to shoot B-roll yourself. NASA, I guess, is what you guys used, and all of their stuff is they're not copyrighted or licensed, so you can use that footage. There's a lot of there are a lot of photos and pictures that you can look up. I'm going to talk a little bit more about music that you can use, and I can hit graphics as well next week during the editing lecture. But there are resources out there if you want certain footage that you just can't shoot yourself.